When I was younger, I used to watch all kinds of television. Trust me, going back, I think it was grade 7 or grade 8, we went through how much free time you spend watching television. And on an average day, back when I was a kid, I'd watch about 8 hours of television a day, squeezing some in before I went to school and lots in after school. If I wasn't playing with my toys, I was watching television, because I really wasn't a video game kid until years down the road. And for myself on the weekends, I watched a lot of television too. Throughout all the years, I watched many different television series, and some of them I even got into because of the cars that were into them. I'm not talking about the custom ones that you find in shows like Knight Rider or the A-Team. I'm talking about the cool ones that you find in some of the most regular shows on television. One of my favorite shows back in the early 90s was Family Matters. And when Steve Urkel shows up for the first time to pick up Carl's daughter, he shows up in a BMW Isetta. That was actually my introduction to that car. I never knew about it until that TV show. And I thought, oh my God, what is this? I want to know more about this car. It is so cool. All from a TV show. Family Matters. It was funny. It was great. It brought tons of family values into my world. Hell, you can say I'm bad and try and shame me for it all you want, but I actually went out as Steve Urkel for Halloween when I was a kid, because I love the show so much. His nerdy aspect, always being put down and yet never taking no for an answer. And his car was just the coolest thing. It fit him so well. Well, television has given us some great icon cars. And today, AutoLooks is going to be talking about some of the most famous TV icon cars of all time. Welcome back to the AutoLooks podcast. I'm your host, as always, the doctor to the automotive industry, Mr. Everett J, coming to you from our host website at AutoLooks.net. If you haven't been there, stop by, check it out, read some of the reviews, check out some of the ratings, go to the Corporate Links website page. Big or small, we have them all, car companies from around the globe. The AutoLooks podcast is brought to you by Ecom Entertainment Group and distributed by Podbeam.com. If you'd like to get in touch with us, send us an email over at email@AutoLooks.net. So like I said in the beginning, Family Matters. Well, Steve Urkel's famous car was actually a 1960 BMW Isetta 300. Not the 600 that fit more people, a 300. When he rolled up in that car, I thought it was the most fitting car for his image. This dorky, whiny little kid that just does not give up on anything. He wants to date Laura so badly, but he can't. Only his alternate ego when he separates himself out, when Janelle White is actually playing another character, the cool, suave version of Urkel, does Laura want to date him. And seeing that car, going on the date with him, she doesn't think anything of it. It's the dorkiest little weird bubble car of all time. While as a kid who loved cars, no. It may have been the weirdest, dorkiest, slowest car you can ever think of, but you know what? To me, that was one of the coolest things I ever saw. And when I saw the door open and swing out with the steering wheel attached to it, I'm like, oh my God, this is even better. Except if you get in a front-end collision, how do you get out? Well, you got to go through the roof. It was cool, but it was an icon. Family Matters today is not a show that you can find on any major streaming sites. Hell, you can find it on YouTube, but it's really hard to find. Unlike The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Family Matters apparently didn't get put into major syndication, so the Isetta is lost, but not forgotten. Because for anyone who grew up during those times, if you say the name Steve Urkel and you're a car fanatic, you automatically think Isetta. It's an icon car from television. Kind of like one of the original TV icon cars. A 1921 Oldsmobile Roadster utilized by the Beverly Hillbillies. Yep, you could be shooting at some pool and up comes a bubbling gruel. But hey, when you move to Beverly Hills and you show up in a beat up old 21 Oldsmobile with all of your stuff on it, you are going to change the world. A lot of people didn't know what the car actually was, but for it was an Oldsmobile. And the Beverly Hillbillies lived like it was a Prohibition time. And they showed up in a car from a Prohibition time of the dirty 30s. They did it perfectly to their characters. Now, you hardly ever saw the car in the TV series. But it's funny, it's a memorable vehicle because it was also utilized on a Simpson episode where Homer goes to space. When they show up at Cape Canaveral, they show up in the Beverly Hills Roadster with Marge on top in the rocking chair being grandma. It's kind of cool. And it's an icon vehicle. Put it on a piece of paper with a whole bunch of different iconic movie, television series cars, and people would be like, the Beverly Hillbillies car. It's just like a stair truck. So they had had two different variations of it. They had one from the 80s and one from the 70s for the stair truck. Yeah, it actually changed throughout the series. And if you know what the show I'm talking about, that's Arrested Development. One of the early shows to help Matthew Bateman's career take off, the stair car, or they called it the stair car, but it's more of a stair truck, was an old Ford F-150 with stairs at the back of it. Now, the entire company goes bankrupt, and they lose all their money except this one house, and the only vehicle they have to use is a stair car used to get into their old personal jet. It's kind of funny because there's so many instances during the show that the stair vehicle is used for so many different things. He parks it at the wall in Mexico, and the Mexicans hop over the wall. He parks it by the wall so his brother could try and get out of jail, and other convicts sneak out of jail. Goes through a parade route and destroys banners. Like, it's an iconic vehicle. It's a red, white, and blue, mostly white, Ford F-150 stair vehicle to access an airplane. And it became an icon. Hell, it's not even from a show that was super big. People remember Arrested Development and remember the careers it helped create. But the stair truck? Put an F-150 with stairs on it. And people are like, Arrested Development. I remember that car. Just like if I look at you with red glaring eyes and a stoner attitude and say, you can literally cruise the Vista. If you grew up in the 90s and into the early 2000s, you've seen this show that I'm talking about, that 70s show. Now, Red, the father of Eric, gives him the old car, his Vista Cruiser, a 1969 Vista Cruiser. Yeah. And it becomes the car of that 70s show all the way until near the end of the series, where Red is finally doing good in his life. He has a good paying job, his kids are moving out, he doesn't have to pay for anything else. He could finally live his dream. And what does he do? He buys a 56 Corvette. Like, come on, what person in the 1970s who went to war, who came back, lived through the hard times of the economy, and finally, near the end of the 70s, when things were starting to get better, says to themselves, I can finally afford what I always wanted and what I wanted when I came back. I can get my Corvette. But the 70s show, the Vista Cruiser is it. Seriously, you go to a car show, and if there's a green Vista Cruiser there, people automatically think of that 70s show. That is the car from the show. We all know it. Kind of like a 1949 Triumph Trophy TR5. Now, if you don't know what this is from, then you don't remember one of the most iconic scenes in TV history. It was done near the end of this series, and it was all in hopes to save the show, and yet it was such a cheesy move, and yet it didn't save the show. I'm talking about Fonz from Happy Days and his jump over the sharks. Like, come on. It was cheesy. It was a cheap way to try and save the show. But the Fonz was too cool. And it's the 1950s. He rolls around on a Triumph Trophy TR5 motorcycle. That is the Fonz. Cool car. Cool ride. Because he's the Fonz. Hey, Mr. Henry Winkler. Somebody my wife has actually met. Because he's actually come to our city and stayed at a hotel. The Fonz. Henry Winkler. I wasn't able to go and meet him because my son was too little and I couldn't leave him on his own. So I miss seeing the Fonz. But I wanted to meet him and be like, how was that Triumph? Was it a cool bike? Did you actually get to drive it around? Or was it literally just part of the show for show? Like, I get it. You're the Fonz. You're supposed to be cool. But you're thinking of rolling around in like a 1930s Ford T-Bucket Roadster. But no, this is the Fonz with his leather jacket, man. He's rolling around like James Dean on a motorcycle. Oh, yeah, because he's too cool. His leather jacket and his motorcycle. Unfortunately, he's living in the United States and he's driving a British-made motorcycle. So I think if he's driving a Hog, it might be a little bit different. The 70s kind of had a lot of the great iconic vehicles that you could think of. And one of them that a lot of people forget about is the Rockford Files. Now, this is a show my dad liked to watch. And it's just like, yeah, okay, whatever. It's a cop drama from the 1970s. Blah, blah, blah. Boring, boring, boring. Well, the one guy's coming up to the office once, and he pulls up, and I'm like, what the hell is that? And like, he's showing up in his personal car. My dad's like, no, that's his car. The Rockford Files. Drove a 1974 Pontiac Firebird Esprit Sport Tune model. Sure, it was that stupid brownish beige from the 1970s. It's just so boring. Like, who wants a color that you can literally lose on a beach? Well, it's the 70s. A lot of people did. But it's a Pontiac Firebird. I'm like, hey, wait, that's a Firebird. My dad's like, yeah, that's the Rockford Files car. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. Funny thing is no matter how bad that show is or how much you didn't want to watch it with anyone or even think about it, when he rolled up in his Firebird, you thought, okay, He's a little bit cool. He's got a cool car. Maybe the show is worth watching. Kind of like today when you watch the show Lucifer. If you don't understand this, the show Lucifer is about the devil coming to earth, wants to get out of hell, blah, 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 blah. Okay? And then there's this smoking hot woman he's working with, Officer Beckett, and her ex-husband's in there, blah, 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 blah. But Lucifer rolls around in a 58 Corvette. I'm sitting there thinking, like, the devil, that's the car he chooses when he comes to earth. He chooses a Corvette. And then I'm like thinking to myself, okay, yeah, I could kind of see that. The Corvette does make you feel like a badass. It's a cool car to anyone. The early generation Corvettes, when people see them, they think badass. Second generation model from like 55 until 58, until the 60 Stingray model took over, and even the 60 Stingray model until the 70s, those two generations were some of the coolest Corvettes in history, and it doesn't matter. You see it and you think cool. You think great. Like I said, Red Foreman from that 70s show got one, and then people automatically think, that's one of the two cars from that show. Hell, they used one in the movie True Lies, even for a short period. Arnold Schwarzenegger drove one. It was cool. And Lucifer has the Corvette, the devil. Now, I only know this because mother-in-law really loves this show. I got her kind of into it as we're watching it, and he needed something to watch when she's up. So I put it on one day because I know they like cop dramas. I'm like, okay, whatever, we'll just watch this. I kind of got into it. It was okay. It was decent. It was pretty much Officer Beckett is the only reason why I stayed watching the show, because she's really attractive. But Lucifer's got this suave, cool aspect to it, and you want to kind of see how it winds up. But every once in a while, they'll throw in his Corvette. And it's just like, yeah, that's the devil. That's the devil driving a Corvette. That is cool. Not as cool as Miami Vice, which used a 72 Ferrari Daytona Spider 365 GTB and a Ferrari Testarossa. Oh, yeah. Now, the Daytona you really don't think about when you think of Miami Vice. If you watch the show and you followed it, yeah, okay, you remember Miami Vice and it had Ferrari Daytona. The Testarossa, pure white Ferrari Testarossa, is it. That's the car. That is the car. One of the most synonymous cars of the 1980s. Next to the Countach, the Testarossa is the 1980. And Miami Vice made that Testarossa famous. And the Testarossa made that show famous. But Ferrari was just living the high life during the 1980s. Because where Miami Vice had its pure white Testarossa, Magna PI had its 308 GTS red Ferrari. Like, this guy solves mysteries. He's a private investigator. How does he live in this giant mansion, have a helicopter, and cruise around in a Ferrari when he solves crime? Like, how many PIs have you ever seen driving around something that cool? I don't know about you, but I watched the cartoon Duckman, and that always seems a little more realistic to me because he's driving around in a beat-up, crappy old car in that series. But Magnum PI, he's got the Ferrari. Hell, Playmobil released that Ferrari, and it's sitting right behind me as I'm recording this episode. Because yes, I am a collector of Playmobil movie, TV, and specialty cars. I have most of the Porsche collection, the Back to the Future collection, quite a bit of the Volkswagen collection, and most of the great movies and television series. The A-Team van, Knight Rider, Magnum PI, and the Aston Martin from James Bond. Because, I gotta have that Aston. Magnum PI. You see a 308 GTS, it doesn't matter what shape it's in. If it's red and it's sitting there, you're thinking big mustache, Tom Selleck, 1980s, with a Hawaiian shirt partially open, showing his hairy chest off, and that is Magnum PI in a nutshell. Hell, that's the 80s in a nutshell. The 80s on television literally belonged to Ferrari. Where you think of the 80s and you think of the Dukes of Hazzard with the 69 Charger, no. Magnum PI and Miami Vice were bigger. And I'm literally waiting for Playmobil to release the Ferrari Daytona and the Testarossa from Miami Vice so I can add it to my massive collection of Playmobil cars. They're ones that I think, now that they're doing Ferrari cars for Playmobil, they need to do. Come on, give us our Miami Vice stuff. I, really want these. Hell, Playmobil, if you're listening to this, listen to a lot of vehicles in this and try and make them. You got sales, at least with me. But before that, looking back into the 70s, you saw a lot of great, cool cars. And there's been a lot of great television icon cars. Hell, you got Get Smart, The Addams Family, Green Acres, all being part of it. They'll have their vehicles. Hell, Get Smart's original car is essentially borrowed from the very first James Bond movie, Dr. No. Get Smart, his iconic television series car, comes from James Bond, the man that they are literally trying to make fun of in the comedy spy show. And he cruises around in a 65 Sunbeam Tiger, the same car James Bond drove around in Cuba in when he was going after Dr. No. A Sunbeam Tiger. Yeah, one of the first James Bond cars is also synonymous with Get Smart. But people don't remember the Sunbeam Tiger for James Bond. They remember the Aston Martin DB5. When it comes to television, Get Smart is with the Sunbeam Tiger. Kind of like a 33 Packard V12 limo is the Addams Family car. You have a black Packard V12 limo with the convertible front and the covered rear, okay? Because that's how they did it in the 30s. The driver got soaking wet or freezing cold, while the occupants stay dry, because that's literally how we rolled back then. And that's how the Addams Family rolls. Lurch sits up front out into the weather, and the Addams Family sit in the rear. That black Packard has been utilized by the Addams Family, the original television series, the newer movies, and even the new Wednesday show utilizes that same car. A 33 Packard V12, one of the most luxurious cars for its time. Well, with Duesenberg and Pierce Arrow sitting above that, Packard wasn't right at the top of the game, but it competed with the top of the game vehicles. And even though they don't exist today, all you have to do is show somebody a black Packard V12 limo, and they're automatically like, I know that. That's the Addams Family. Where's Lurch? Where's Lurch? Hell, 66, we got the Lotus Elan, one of the lightest Lotus sports cars ever made. Well, until the Elise came out. They worked so much to keep the weight down to ensure that that vehicle was as light as possible and easy to throw around. That's why it became such a great vehicle for the Avengers to drive around in. Yes, the Avengers television series used a Lotus. Well, hell, they're from Great Britain. They might as well use a British vehicle. And Lotus was looking for a way to sell the brand new Elan to the public. So they gave one to the Avengers series. Pure black Lotus Elan. You see one today, if it's black or if it's white, you automatically think the Avengers series. Kind of like one of the most famous tractors in television series. I want to live a simple life, and Green Acres is the place for me. I don't care that my wife wants to live in New York City. Screw her. We're moving to Green Acres. And I'm getting myself a Hoyt Clagwell tractor, a green Hoyt Clagwell tractor, because Green Acres is the place to be. Yeah, I've watched the show. We got that, was it the Deja Vu, right before, while I was in college living at home. And my dad and I actually used to watch a lot of the older series. So Green Acres was on that, usually around supper time, and we would watch it. And I watched it and I'm like, this is a funny show. But in the intro video, you see him on the Hoyt Clagwell tractor, but you hardly ever see it in the show. But if you're a person that's seen the show and understand it and know that song, if you see one out sitting in a field somewhere, even in beat up shape, you're like, hey, that's Green Acres. That's the Green Acres tractor, right? It's kind of like seeing a silver Lamborghini Nitro. You're like, hey, that's a Lamborghini. I know that tractor. It's Green Acres is the place to be. One of the most memorable ones in history. One came from a show in the 70s, and the other one came from a show in the 80s. Funny thing is, the one from the 70s, the car was brand new for the show. And the one in the 80s, the car was old for the show. The ones I'm talking about, the first one is about two detectives. One's real buttoned down and one's very easygoing. And they use a car that's cool. The buttoned down one uses a cool car. He has a 1975 Gran Torino red with a custom white stripe on it. Yeah, you know what show I'm talking about. Starsky and Hutch. Hell, Ben Stiller and Owen Wilson relived that in the movie series, but the original television series had that 75 Gran Torino. And a Gran Torino, you can own any of them out in the world. Any color, people just see it as Gran Torino. If it's red with that white stripe flapping around the side, people automatically look at it and go, Starsky and Hutch. Yes. It's the Starsky and Hutch car. It's kind of like an orange 1969 Dodge Charger with the Confederate flag painted on top. And I don't care who fucking wants to fight me on this. The Confederate flag, I don't care what it stands for, has got to be on the top of it to make it the original General Lee. You got to remember, the show came from the Deep South. There's a reason why the Confederate flag was there. I don't care if it offends anybody, but it was there for a reason. It was part of the car because of the area it came from. The Dukes of Hazzard came out in the late 70s and into the 80s. Really blew up in the 80s. And that 69 Charger, they went through hundreds of them trying to do all those jumps because they bent the frames on them. They're not made for jumping like that. Those things were big and heavy. Hell, those cars barely even turned corners. You gotta remember, it's the 70s. Power was good for straight line drag racing, not for turning corners. You want to turn corners, you gotta get yourself a European sports car there, weirdo. That's what people thought. But an orange 69 Charger with a push bar on the front, people automatically know what it is. That is one of the most famous television cars of all time. The General Lee. And the show also had Daisy's Jeep and Boss Hoss's Cadillac, two other famous vehicles from the TV series. And they were all standard products you can go out and buy. Anyone can go out and buy these things. Get a Cadillac, put some horns on the hood, and I'm Boss Hoss. Them damn Duke boys, done it again. Now, that was one of the few shows that was actually good. Like, Starsky and Hutch was, whatever. But Dukes of Hazzard, there was always a chase in it. So you always knew it was going to be cool. Them damn Duke boys. And I actually got to meet them once. An old car show I went to that no longer exists, the Fleetwood Classic Cruise In, just outside of London, Ontario, no longer exists. And I actually missed going to the last one because of automotive issues. I thought it was going to be happening again the next year, but it wasn't. I went one year and both of the original characters who played Bo and Luke were there. I got to meet them. The Dukes of Hazzard, the Duke boys. Would have liked to meet Daisy instead, but, Duke boys, whatever. Also got to meet the guys from Welder Up as well. They could have talked my ear off for hours. Those guys I could just sit down and chat with. They were too cool. But the Dukes of Hazzard 69 Charger, that is one of the most famous television icon cars of all time. There is one more that's more famous than it, even though its TV series was even shorter. But I got two more before that. One is one of the most famous Canadian television cars of all time, the Dodge Ram van, or as we better know it here in the Great White North, the Possum van from the Red Green Show. The first television series ever aired on the International Space Station, the Red Green Show from Canada. Yes, from Rick Green and Steve Smith from Smith & Smith Productions. The Red Green Show had the Possum van, literally a Dodge van painted to look like a possum. You only saw it in the little flash forwards from scene to scene, and that's about it. You saw it more in the movie than anywhere else on the TV show. But if you have an old Ram van from the early 1980s and you paint it to look like a possum, you'll know it's the Possum van from the Red Green Show. And even to the south of our border in the States, people down there know about it as well, because the Red Green Show was one of the biggest Canadian TV series of all time. Yeah, Canada actually does make some cool shows and actually has a car on one of the most iconic television series list. Not as iconic as our next one. Our next one started in a manga series. Oh yeah, you know where I'm going with this. A car I actually missed out on getting once because I was too scared to pick up the phone and call for a $400 86 Corolla GTS notchback, not the hatchback, the notchback one. And I missed out on the deal. I drove past. I'm like, I got to call the guy today. It's been for sale for like 2-3 days now. I saw the price. I got to call him today. I can't drag my feet. I'm driving past and he's signing the papers with somebody. And I'm like, no, I missed out. And I really wanted it because I found out about a brand new show from Japan. This is during my days in college when I started being able to download and see shows and everything from around the globe. And I found this TV series called Initial D with a 1986 Corolla, or as they call it, the 86 Toyota Trueno from Japan. Black and white Panda. One of the most iconic cartoon cars in history. This is one of the only ones that makes the list that's a cartoon, but it's a cartoon based on real cars. You have to remember there's a Skyline in there. There's a Civic Type R. There's a Sylvia. There's the Sil 80. They put real life cars into this cartoon series. Later made into a movie, but the cartoon series gave us one of the most iconic Japanese cars of all time. The 86 Corolla. A car that people in North America always just pushed aside as a piece of crap. Oh, it's some Jap crap that doesn't have enough power, until we realized this thing could turn corners like nothing else. It may not have the power of a Corvette, but if you're on a mountain pass, it'll outperform a Corvette. Oh yeah, that 86 Panda Trueno. And I almost had one. Everybody always asks, if you can go back in time and change one thing in your life, one thing, what would you change? I'm like, I would have made that phone call. Like, really? I'm like, yeah, Oda made that phone call. I was in college. I barely had enough money to finish my year out, but I had more than enough money to buy that car. And I would have bought it. I would have put it in the garage, my dad's garage, and I would have sat on it until I can afford to fix it. That is the time in Everett J's life that he can go back. If he could change it, I would. A lot of other people would be like, oh, I'll go back and make up with this person. Oh, I'll go back and make this little decision. So I went, no, I would go back and get that car because I missed out on it. And it's one of the most iconic television series cars of all time. And it's the only cartoon one to make the list. Well, the next one actually makes the list. It's one of the most iconic cars in history, and it comes in both regular version and now in cartoon format. I'm talking about that lime green, black hood, 1977 Mini Cooper from Mr. Bean. Mr. Bean has been around the world. And why is the Mr. Bean Mini Cooper bigger than some of the cars on this list, like the 69 Charger? Well, you have to remember, Dukes of Hazzard didn't really make its way outside of North America very well. Same with Miami Vice or Get Smart. But Mr. Bean has been everywhere. He's been seen in more countries than any other British show. Rowan Atkinson is a car enthusiast on his own, and his Mini Cooper in the show is so famous and so well known of that anybody can think about it. My kids, I bought them a little green Mini Cooper back in the day, and they call it the Mr. Bean car. Funny thing is, it was just a regular Mini Cooper label at the bottom of it, but literally Matchbox should have wrote on it Mr. Bean Mini Cooper. Yes, that's 77 Mini Cooper, the most famous television car of all time. And today you can still see it as his own car in the cartoon series. It is transferred from real life to cartoon. It lives in both television world. Hasn't made a transition to CG, thank God, because we don't need a CG Mini Cooper, okay? We got the regular, we got the cartoon. That's all we need. But Mr. Bean, he's the man. By a guy that was once told, you'll never make it in this industry. A man who twice crashed his McLaren F1 and turned around, and when he finally sold it off, he sold it off for more than he paid for it and repaired it for. He made a profit off of it. Rowan Atkinson in Mr. Bean, the most iconic television car of all time, the Mini Cooper. Hell, it's one of the most iconic movie cars of all time from the Italian Job, both the original and the newer one with Mark Wahlberg. Yeah. You may fight me and say, the Testarossa from Miami Vice or the Ferrari from Magnum PI. Hell, even the Trueno are bigger than it. But no, adults and kids, hell, even the elderly know what the Mini Cooper is. And they all know if it comes in bright green, it's from Mr. Bean. So iconic cars from TV shows. But even though we've gone through this massive list and named the Mini Cooper from Mr. Bean number 1, we have to give a special shout out to another car with a bit of green on it and lots of green behind it. I'd say it's the most iconic car from Canadian television. The Possum van may be one that people across North America know, but this one more people know of because of the story of green behind it. And what I'm talking about is that 1975 green Chrysler New Yorker driven by Ricky from the Trailer Park Boys. He's missing a passenger side door and is literally beat up in a piece of crap. Its literal name is the Shitmobile. And the funniest thing is, last year at Motorama in Toronto, I actually met a person who had the original one from the TV series and drove it across Canada, even though it's missing a door. Yeah, a 75 green Chrysler New Yorker. Ricky's most famous car for picking up and delivering green, which is funny because it has a bit of green on it. And this is another car like the Mr. Bean car that has made the transition from the real life version into the cartoon as the Trailer Park Boys has merged into the cartoon world now on Netflix. And if you don't know who the Trailer Park Boys are, go out and find out about them. Because like Mr. Bean and how he's gone across the world, the Trailer Park Boys from Canada, hell, from the east coast of Canada, are another great show. And we have to give a special shout out to Ricky Shitmobile because this 75 Chrysler New Yorker is one of those famous cars that always gets overlooked on many different lists. It may not top the list, but it sure well is there. So really, is it one of your favorites or are there others? How many of them do you remember, and how many of them have you seen in real life? I've seen quite a few of these cars in real life, the actual variations of them, and it's pretty cool. I haven't met the characters behind it. I've met some of them, but seeing these cars in real life just takes you back to watching those television shows. And like I said in the beginning, how many hours a day did I watch television from elementary to high school? 8 hours a day, every day, and up to 12 to 14 hours on weekends. My life was television, and shows with cars in it took precedence over everything else. Because hell, in the end, I am literally just a car guy at heart. And I love my cars. And I love my TV shows with cars. So if you could think about any other TV series that you've watched and you know of that has some great iconic TV cars, just let us know. Whether it be cartoon or regular, tell us about the famous real-life vehicles from television series. Send us an email, send us a text, send us a message, a comment, anything. Tell us about some of these great cars and some of the ones that may have missed from some TV shows that you know of. Hell, if you don't like the fact that we named Mr. Bean's Mini Cooper the most iconic television series car of all time, send us a comment about it. And then while you do that, like the AutoLooks podcast, just so you can keep commenting about anything else from the AutoLooks.net podcast. And after that, stop by the website, read some of the reviews, check out some of the ratings, go to the Corporate Links website page. Big or small, we have them all, car companies from around the globe, on the AutoLooks.net website. The AutoLooks podcast is brought to you by Ecom Entertainment Group and distributed by Podbeam.com. If you'd like to get in touch with us, send us an email over at email@AutoLooks.net. So for myself, Everett J., the Ecom Entertainment Group, and Podbeam.com, strap yourself in for this one fun, wild ride that the most famous television cars are going to take you on.